Hello, viewers and Quora readers. Every week I am Tom Palkin II, and I write for Quora as well as I'm an Asia Pacific affairs commentator, and I address a lot of issues that are happening in China in regards to politics, economics, and societal issues. Well, what I'd like to do every week is discuss about fake news about China and address some of those reports and respond. As you may know, right now, the big story is about the coronavirus here in China and its spread. It's very deadly and dangerous. Some people are dying, and there's a lot of people being infected. But what's really happening is there's a lot of fake news about this story. So let me go ahead and see some of the stories that you may find and you may have heard of already. Well, as I look, there's a story. If you see, I'm on my phone. It's posted by the Washington Times, an author named Bill Gertz, on January 24th, 2020. The headline is Virus Hit Wuhan Has Two Laboratories Linked to Chinese Biowarfare Program. Okay, so basically, what it's claiming is that the reason we have coronavirus is that China was engaged in some type of illicit and covert bioweapons program that somehow the germ was leaked, and now suddenly a lot of people are infected in China. So, what are the details that are in this story? Well, according to Bill Gertz, he writes, the deadly animal virus epidemic spreading globally may have originated in a Wuhan laboratory linked to China's covert biological weapons program, according to an Israeli biological warfare expert. Well, let's address even this quote: covert biological weapons program. Well, if it's covert, don't you think that that would be a top secret? China would never release or let anybody know that such a biological weapons program would exist. And even if it does exist, why would it be located in Wuhan, which is in the center part of China, where there is 11 million people? Don't you think that if there is a covert program, they would have it in some isolated region, and certainly not in a big city like Wuhan? But that's what Bill Gertz is talking about. So where is he getting this idea? Well, apparently, Mr. Gertz got the idea from one time he was watching or listening to a Radio Free Asia, and there was a rebroadcast of a Wuhan television report from 2015 showing China's most advanced virus research laboratory known as Wuhan Institute of Virology. Okay, well, guess what? This is not a biological weapons lab. It's certified. Guess what? It's mainly for civilian use. A lot of times, China is doing its part to try to find cures for diseases all over the world. So guess what? Wuhan is one of the places where they are studying diseases and trying to find cures and treatment. No surprise there, but this has nothing to do with a bioweapons strategy. But let Gertz continue on. Well, why? Apparently, there's a man by the name of Danny Shoham. He is a former Israeli military intelligence officer. Okay, folks, if he is an intelligence officer and he is going on the media to talk about what he is doing, don't you think that's a bit strange? Because don't you think that an intelligence officer would not disclose such information in media reports? Oh well, that's maybe how he does his business. And this guy gets around. I looked him up on Google. He's all over the place, always talking about China and his expertise as a former Israeli military intelligence officer. And he usually has a lot of these conspiracy theories that China is up to no good and doing these terrible things. And according to some research, he is working for a think tank. And let me double check on what the name of that think tank is. Oh yes, the Begin Sadah Center for Strategic Studies is the think tank he works on, and it's based in Israel. He also is working for a university in Israel. So he may have some expertise on biological weapons and all that, but by calling himself intelligence officer, I don't know. I mean, it just sounds odd that he would boast about that, because intelligence officers are not supposed to talk too much to the media. But that's how he does his job, apparently. And I also notice in how a lot of these reports, they don't say is. China has a biological weapons. They will say might have, could have, possibly, allegedly, potentially. And Shoham does the same thing. He's never saying it is. It just says maybe they do. That's very important to note, because if, let's say, for example, lawyers want to file a defamation suit, if you use the word is or you are, that can make you liable to a defamation suit. But if you say perhaps, should, might be, then there is no defamation lawsuit, because in that situation, you can just say, I was only guessing. I wasn't saying it is. So just be aware of how they use their language. They always say maybe, perhaps, whatever, when that's just the way they are. And another issue is he's quoting from a State Department report. And they also use vague language. They don't say China is a has a covert biological warfare program. They say they might have. We suspect. Well, that's not good enough. If they really believe it's the case, why don't they write the report and show the evidence? But guess what? They never show evidence. They just say, we just think. We think that China has something, doing something bad. We have no proof. We're just guessing. So we suspect. And then they write up reports and all this rather strange nonsense. So let me continue on in reading this article about the coronavirus. It says, one ominous sign, said a U.S. official, is that the false rumors since the outbreak began several weeks ago have begun circulating. And what exactly are these false rumors they are suggesting? Oh, apparently the false rumors are supposedly claiming on Chinese social media sites that they are blaming the U.S. for the coronavirus, saying they are engaged in biological warfare. Well, I don't believe that's true. Every once in a while, somebody will ask me, do they think the U.S. is involved? I say no, it's not worth the trouble. This is a very dangerous game you're playing. China is not doing biowarfare with the coronavirus, and the U.S. is not doing biowarfare with the coronavirus. But why would some Chinese suspect? Well, maybe they're upset because U.S. Secretary of State was going on a world tour to Central Asian countries when the outbreak first started, and he was saying the Chinese government is the gravest threat to our world today. Okay, well, so of course some Chinese might be a little bit suspicious, thinking, wait a minute here. If Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State, the top diplomat of the country, is saying all these terrible things about China right when China is suffering, maybe Washington might be doing something wrong. Well, no, I'm just going to say it's just foolish diplomacy, and Pompeo was just being careless. Nothing more than that. I don't see a conspiracy, but yeah, there were a few reports of Chinese people making that claim, and I heard about it as well. But when I talk to real Chinese people, your average Chinese person, they don't believe the U.S. is involved in some type of covert sabotage of China in regards to the coronavirus. But let's also get back to the fact that let's go back to the article. It says the Wuhan Institute has studied coronavirus in the past, including the strain that causes severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS. Now, is this a shock? Are we supposed to be surprised? I'm not. Over a decade ago, 2003 to be exact, China was struggling with a very severe outbreak of SARS. Don't you think that because they had this outbreak that maybe they would assign scientists and labs to study SARS and to figure out what to do to prevent future outbreaks? There is nothing shocking about that. And there's nothing disturbing. And why Wuhan? Well, actually, I have written a number of articles about China's science and high-tech innovations, and I've also written a book about it. And one of my discoveries was is that Wuhan is one of the centers of China's science and high-tech innovations movement. They have great universities there. They have great laboratories. They have great R&D centers to forge ahead on these science and high-tech innovations. So there should be no surprise that Wuhan is studying on these cases. But it is, as I said before, it is about for civilian purposes. It's about finding cures. It's about ways to create treatment. It has nothing to do with creating these deadly pathogens to kill the world. And just think about it. If China really wanted to do biowarfare, you're not going to open up the lab in your country. You're going to go somewhere else. You're going to have secret labs. You're not going to have it in a city with 11 million people. That is too high risk. You're not going to kill your own people just as a testing ground. That's nonsense. Because if it spreads and your country dies, how do you win? It's nonsense. It's just pure foolishness. Okay, but apparently Mr. Shoham, who is the expert, insists that China is engaged in all of these activities as I continue to read the article. And then apparently he mentioned something about a Wuhan Institute of Biological Products. Well, at least he's being honest here. He's saying it's a civilian facility. But of course he uses this interesting language to say it could be linked to the Chinese defense establishment. Could be. Well, where's your evidence? Doesn't mention. He just says could be linked, might be linked, or whatever. Okay? So he continues on, and then he loves to talk about that State Department report where the U.S. suspects China of biowarfare. Well, go ahead, let them do that. And then it never mentions the Canadian lab that also is part of the story. The story goes is that there was a Canadian lab in Winnipeg where the Canadian lab in Winnipeg, which is the national, let me double check on this, the Canadian National Microbiology Laboratory. At this Canadian Microbiology Laboratory, you had an incidence of a woman I can also refer to my phone because the Canadian media, CBC, has actually a really good story about it. And what apparently happened was there was a woman who was fired and escorted from the laboratory, and she was a Chinese woman. So let me just bring that up for a moment. And let me recall her name. But she was a Miss Chi, and also her husband. And she was escorted out, and it turns out that they never gave reasons, but what actually happened is you have to think about it this way. There's strict privacy laws in Canada, so if somebody gets fired, a company can't say the reason why they got fired, and even if there was an arrest. So apparently when she was escorted and fired, the only hint they gave was she took a trip to China. She actually gave conferences at the World Health Organization, Tsinghua University, and a number of other places, and it was very public events that she attended, and they were just worried that maybe she was possibly leaking intellectual property secrets from the lab. That being the case, she was fired because they just worried that she was leaking secrets. But another thing to address is, in according to this conspiracy theory, what they're saying is that the germs were somehow leaked from the Canadian laboratory and got released into the Wuhan laboratory and then leaked from the Wuhan laboratory. Well, how is that possible? The lady was flying commercial airlines. Don't you think security would have stopped her and says, what are you doing with these germs? Of course they're not going to allow her to walk up with germs or anything like that. And also, you would imagine the laboratory is not going to allow her to take out any secret information. That's outrageous. So what I'm trying to get at is that this story is totally bogus, and just be aware, and then just don't fall for all of this fake news. Thank you.